This video will contain spoilers for the final arc of Bleach for those who have not read or watched the series. In the behind-the-scenes booklet included with the Blu-ray release of Bleach Thousand Year Blood War Core 1, there was one particular statement made by Tai Kubo that caught my attention. The mangaka mentions that the story of Bleach technically concluded after the Arrancar saga, then returned with a reprise in the Lost Agent arc, which he described as essentially a single extended episode before restarting once more with the Thousand Year Blood War arc. Kubo made this remark in relation to how the anime adaptation of the final arc captures the sensation of a reboot, but reading it, I couldn't shake the feeling that this had become his intention when he was drawing the series. It feels less like a retroactive framing and more like a quiet confirmation of a design philosophy that became embedded in the work itself. When you look back at Bleach as a whole, it becomes very clear that the first three arcs form a single, unified narrative. Everything from the Substitute Shinigami arc through the Soul Society arc and into the sprawling Arrancar saga traces one continuous story. An orange-haired teenage boy gains Shinigami powers and is pulled into a world of Shinigami, hollows, and spiritual conflict. The entire machinery of these arcs runs largely through the ambitions of Sosuke Aizen, the man who desired to transcend all things and claim dominion over the universe itself. Woven into that conflict is Ichigo's deeply personal journey, one that demands he not only embrace his role as a protector, but also reconcile the parts of himself he has long rejected. That particular thread begins to surface near the end of Soul Society and unravels fully throughout the Arrancar saga, culminating in a finale that feels genuinely conclusive. It is not hard to understand why Aizen's defeat reads as an ending. Some questions linger, yes, but the emotional and narrative core of what Kubo had been building reaches a definitive resolution. Still, Kubo had more stories to tell, and rather than continue in the same vein, he made a deliberate choice to change his approach entirely. That is where Bleach diverges from its contemporaries in a meaningful way. Naruto and One Piece, for all their internal divisions into arcs and sagas, are fundamentally singular narratives. Each arc serves the larger whole, feeding into an overarching story that has been in motion since Chapter 1. Kubo, by contrast, stepped away from that framework. With the beginning of the Lost Agent arc, he essentially declared that Bleach would no longer tell one long continuous story. Instead, it would tell a series of standalone tales that operate under the same umbrella, sharing a world, a cast, and a sensibility while each standing on its own terms. The Lost Agent arc demonstrates this immediately. There is familiarity, of course. Ichigo's loss of his Shinigami powers and his drive to recover them connects directly to where the Arrancar saga left off, since those powers are inseparable from who he is. But the arc itself feels genuinely distinct. Its stakes are smaller and more human. Its focus is narrower and more grounded. It has a clear beginning, a clear end, and a self-contained emotional arc that does not require what came before in order to function. Kubo's description of it as a single extended episode is apt. It reads like a standalone entry in an already established world, something closer in spirit to a spin-off story than a continuation. That quality is not a weakness. If anything, it gives the arc a particular intimacy that sets it apart from everything surrounding it. The Thousand Year Blood War arc carries this same philosophy forward, though with considerably more ambition and scale. Like the Lost Agent arc, it connects to prior story elements without being beholden to them. It feels like a chapter of Bleach rather than a sequel to one, but where its predecessor was quiet and restrained, Thousand Year Blood War is relentless. The war against Yubak and the Vandenreich is the darkest and most brutal conflict the Bleach universe has ever seen. Everything feels accelerated and intensified, stripped of the breathing room the earlier arcs allowed themselves. It is worth acknowledging that Kubo's health problems during this period had a real impact on the arc's overall quality in the manga. The ending is rushed, and some character fates are left unresolved. Even so, the ambition is unmistakable, and the atmosphere it creates is distinctly its own. One small but telling detail reinforces how Kubo committed to this approach. Both The Lost Agent and Thousand Year Blood War have their respective titles introduced to the reader at the very beginning of each arc. It is a deliberate authorial gesture, signaling from the outset that what follows is its own thing, a new chapter with its own identity, not simply a continuation of what came before. That choice to lead with a title speaks to Kubo's understanding of what he was doing. By framing each arc as a standalone piece, he gave himself the creative freedom to experiment, to shift tone, to change the rules without having to justify every decision against the demands of an ongoing overarching narrative. The umbrella remains, the constraints loosen. The closest parallel I can draw is to what Hirohiko Araki has done, and continues to do, with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Phantom Blood and Battle Tendency share a cohesive narrative, linked at their core by the Stone Mask and the legacy of the Joestar bloodline. But when Stardust Crusaders arrives, JoJo effectively reboots itself. The introduction of stands reshapes the entire framework of the series, and from that point forward, each part becomes its own story. Characters, settings, and even the rules of the world are rebuilt from the ground up with each new part, while still existing within the recognizable universe of JoJo. The through lines are there: recurring families, lingering antagonists, and shared mythology. But each part is designed to function independently. That is exactly what Kubo accomplished with the last two arcs of Bleach, and the New Breeds from Hell one shot follows this same formula precisely. It is unmistakably Bleach, yet it announces itself as something new. There is something generally appealing about this kind of storytelling. A long single threaded narrative has its own pleasures, the sense of accumulation, of everything building towards something, of threads finally converging. But the standalone under an umbrella approach offers something different: freedom, the ability to shift tone without betraying the whole, the ability to introduce new ideas without needing to retrofit them into an existing structure, the ability to let one story end and another begin cleanly without the weight of everything that preceded it pressing down on every page. The disconnected quality that both The Lost Agent and Thousand Year Blood War possess is not incidental. It is part of what makes each of them feel distinct, what gives each arc its own identity rather than blurring them into a continuous whole. It is an approach I find genuinely compelling and one I intend to carry into my own work. Anyway, this started as a short observation after revisiting some old Bleach material and grew into something a bit longer than I expected, but I hope it was worth reading. I'm not entirely sure what the next post will cover, but I will figure it out when I get there. Thanks for reading, and have a good day.